So Stéphane and Alexandre are going to talk to us. Well, actually, you're going to talk to them, and they're going to answer your questions and ask me anything about the OCA infrastructure. So I guess we'll just start off. Stéphane and Alex, just give us a quick intro about you know what the OCA infrastructure is, the work that you do, and why you decided that. You know, it would be useful for the community to haven't asked me anything on this topic.
Yep, sure.
It's mainly to fill in a blank, you know.
It's much more than that. You're the first name on the sheet, we know.
So yeah, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yep, we can hear you.
Perfect.
We can see your screen. We might want to.
Yeah,
make it
I'm
larger.
going to put it larger. How do we do that?
Present
make it a
is
slideshow?
next to the next to the share button at the top of the screen.
If you're sharing your entire screen, you should just be able to start a slideshow, and it should just kick off for you.
It should be loading. All right.
Okay.
Good. So yeah, the reason we thought that it would be nice to have an interactive session is that well, the OCA is it's pretty big, as you know. It's kind of 200 repos with thousands of modules. Like last time I checked on PyPI, we have about 10,000 projects on PyPI across different versions. So that's huge. And last year I made basically this presentation to explain a little bit what the infrastructure to support all that looks like. And to give a quick summary, that's basically a significant part of what we have. There are still little other things running here and there, but most of it is here. So it revolves around GitHub, of course. We have a very big part running the CI on Travis, and now that we are moving to GitHub Actions. We are running code coverage using the codecov.io. There is a Runbot that allows functional people to test the pull requests live without having to deploy them locally, a very important part. We also have a bot running that help maintain the repos in good shape, like generating the readmes, doing the checks when you merge a module, bumping the versions and things like that. The repo is also the bot is also responsible for publishing everything to PyPI. And also we have Weblate. Weblate is the translation platform where we have things that do the synchronization with GitHub. So when you create a new module, actually it's during the test phase that the translation templates are generating and pushed back to GitHub. Then they are picked up by the Weblate to be translated. And when the translation are done, they are pushed back to GitHub with the GitHub logins of the authors. And then there are things running on the OCA instance, like managing the team members, the PSC member, checking the contributor license agreements, and also fetching everything to publish the App Store and generating statistics with the interface GitHub modules. So yeah, it's quite a lot of moving parts, and we thought that it could be nice to answer any questions you have about that in an interactive way. So the floor is yours. I don't know, Alexandre, if you want to add something.
Just want to cut the notifications from Slack, which I forgot to do. This whole architecture has grown over time. Some bits are getting quite a bit rusty, and yeah, we are a bit struggling against the volume here to keep everything working. I mean, recently we had issues with Travis, which started to say, okay, you're consuming too much resources for your tests, and besides, you look like a business and not like an open source project. So we would like to charge you, and this is what triggered the GitHub Actions move. Until GitHub starts saying, okay, you cost us too much running your CI, and we need to discuss. Yep, it's quite a beast, actually.
Yeah. So, any questions? Don't be shy. Actually, I'm not even sure I will see it if there is a question.
Well, they tend to
there's
come
no
up
questions
either
at
in
the
the
moment.
chat. Nope.
If you do want to ask a question, certainly you can either ask in the chat or you can raise your hand. And I think for this session, I can just hit allow talk, and you can ask your question directly.
So if there are no questions, maybe I can say a few words about the new CI running on GitHub Actions. So yeah, basically the approach is that there are no container images, so they are called OCA CI, that are Docker image that basically encapsulated everything needed to run our tests. And the choice, I decided, given the issue with Travis, I decided to make this OCA CI image completely independent of any specific CI runner. So we are going to run that on GitHub, but basically at any time, if we want, we could run those on any other CI runners or even on our own infrastructure. It shouldn't be too difficult because the tests themselves are completely independent of the specified. There is nothing in the image that know actually about GitHub Actions. The image know a little bit about Git, they know about Odoo, but they don't know they will be running on GitHub Actions. So that's an important part. And the main principle is that those images are generated with Odoo pre-installed. So they are built nightly using GitHub Actions 2 and published to the GitHub container repository, container registry, which is ghcr.io, which is relatively new. I think it's 1 or 2 years old. And so you can access those basically like this. And if you look at how it looks like, it's like this. So basically, it's one single Docker file, which is 150 lines long. It's not very complicated. It's basically installing a few Debian packages, installing WKHTML to PDF, Node.js, a Postgres client. It's installing Google Chrome to run some front-end tests. And then it's basically installing Odoo in a virtual environment. And there is a GitHub action here that is publishing those packages every night. So we have a few of them, 22, with the combination of the Python version and the Odoo version that we need. So most of them are Python 3.6, but we still have the version 10, although we don't use them yet. And also the OCB variant. So those are built nightly. So every night there are scheduled actions running. like here, that are basically downloading the latest Odoo version and publishing a new version of the images. And then in each repo, this one, you have a small GitHub action that actually says we are, since this one is example is on branch 15, this thing is going to run this image, actually two jobs, this image on Odoo and this other image on Odoo 15, and running a few steps on inside the container. And the steps are these. It's fairly easy. So basically, first thing it does is initializing the container. So basically, it's doing a Docker pull. Currently, is 3.8 of the image. It's doing a git checkout of the repository, and then it's installing all the add-ons dependencies. So basically, it's looking at all the dependencies of the add-on and doing a pip install of them. So the new thing is that it's doing the installation of add-ons dependencies using pip2. So the reason I do that is because it's much simpler. So we don't have to actually know which repo is containing which add-on. By just doing a pip install, we have on PyPI a flat namespace of all add-ons, and so we can install all the dependencies in basically one command.
This avoids maintaining the OCA dependencies.txt file at the repository level.
Yes, exactly. So it's simpler. And then there are two new checks. The first one is checking the license. And actually the compatibility of license between modules. Well, in OCA, usually we don't have problems with that because everything is open source, but still it does not make sense to create an LGPL module that's going to depend on an AGPL module, because then the end result would be AGPL, and that would be misleading for our users to publish such module as LGPL. So if you try to do that, you'll get an error. And also checking the compatibility of the development status. So the development status is where you say if your module is beta, which is the default, but you can also say it's a production level or mature or alpha. But we have a rule that you cannot, for instance, do a production module that's depending on a beta or an alpha module, because that too would be misleading for your users. Advertising a module as production ready where some of its dependencies would be alpha is also misleading. So that's a new check we are making. And this you will see in migration. We are already seeing it today, that there are many errors like that in our code base, which is basically normal. Anything we don't check is misused. That's normal, but I think it's an important check to make. Also, I think it will help making those development status more visible for contributors, because the default is beta and many people don't care. With that, people should start caring a little bit more about it. And then it's running the usual stuff. So it initializes the test database on Postgres. It's basically running odoo.install of the dependencies of the add-ons of the repo. And the dependencies, they are discovered using manifest2 to query, to look at the depends in the add-on manifests and install first all the dependencies without running the tests. And then after that, it just does runs Odoo with test enable on the add-ons. And when all tests have succeeded, it runs the exports of the POT files to push them back to GitHub if they have changed. And in this case, you see this was a run on the pull request. And this export does not run on pull requests. It will only run on the main branches. And so it's actually pretty simple. If you look at each individual scripts, they are here in the container image, so it should be pretty easy to maintain. So for instance, OCA, what is it, init test database, it's basically running a command to get the dependencies. It does a list depends of all the add-ons of the add-ons directory, which is typically the current directory, with some possible exclusions if we test modules in group, because some modules don't play nice with others. We can do several groups, and so that's how it gets all the dependencies, and then it runs Odoo to install those. And to run tests is the same. It's just generating a list of all installable add-ons in the add-ons directory. If there are none, it's going to succeed, because when you initialize a repo, there is nothing to test, so that's we don't want to fail in that case. And then we just do a coverage run of the add-on directory. Branch is a coverage option to do branch coverage, and then we run Odoo on the database with the add-on test enable and so on and so on. So it's pretty light and simple. And install add-on is a bit longer because I had to care about performance. So it's something we could do with pip install in editable mode, but it was a little bit slow. So here there is an optimization to get the dependencies a bit faster. It's taking some shortcuts that pip install does not do. But basically that's it. And then new things, it's installing this test requirements file if it's present. That's important because sometimes you need to depend on some add-ons that are not yet merged, for instance, on pull request, and for that you have a mechanism to express those in the test requirements file, and then it's displaying the list. And yeah, also an important thing is that
so you could use that to include freeze gun, for instance.
Yes, definitely. So if you have also, yeah, that's correct, Alexandre. Of course, it's not only to depend on unmerged add-on, it's also to depend on dependencies that you don't, external dependencies that you don't want to put in the manifest because they are only used for testing. So for that, it's good to put them in test requirements indeed. And the other part is list external dependencies with the deb key. That's the mechanism we choose to install a specific Debian package we would need to run the tests, and or Debian package that the add-ons depend on. And so you can, in the external dependencies dictionary of the manifest, you can now add a deb key with the list of Debian package you want, or that are prerequisite basically to run the module. So that's a simple way to declare them and to install those. And yeah, I think that's mostly it. So you see, it should be hopefully quite easy to maintain over time. It works for 13, 14, 15. Those are and 10 too, because on the shop invader organization we are running the test for v10 on this image too. So it works until then. It might work on 8 and 9, but it's never been tested. Which means, Alexandre, that we can confidently use this for Runbot if we want also, and back until 10. It should work it should work fine. Yeah.
Currently thinking of at least temporarily rewriting or replacing Runbot Travis to Docker with something which uses this image.
Yeah,
run the
might be
test.
possible.
It could be a really super short way of solving our current issue.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you have a way, well, if we don't right now, I mean, it should be super easy to add to not run the tests. Just install the add-ons in the...
Yes, because actually you could simply. So the run test, for instance, is just this, right? So you're doing add-ons list and running it with test enable and stop after init. But if you just do a similar script that you launch without this, it will just work.
Cool.
Actually, the steps are very explicit in the GitHub action declaration. So install add-ons, check license, check dev status, and so on. But using another script for any step will just work. For instance, you could combine initialize test DB and run test in one. Yeah.
We have a question from Kirill Vangelovsky, who says about the publishing on PyPy. When is it actually done? Anytime the module version changes in the manifest.py?
Actually, anytime there is a push on the main branch. I think now it's running. There was a time where it was running nightly, but definitely when you do an OCA merge command, it's published immediately. And I'm pretty sure it's published anytime you push on the main branch. So, yeah, I'm sure. I'm even sure of that because for using them in GitHub Actions, we really want that because we don't want to wait the next day to rebase and retest dependencies. So yeah, it's published immediately.
Is that a function of the PR, or is that a function of the fact that every PR creates a version change now?
Actually, it's independent of that. The difference is that when you look on PyPI, now those are that's also news. That is, we have classifiers on PI per version, so we can filter the add-ons, but only for 15 are they all there. But the difference before. Now you see that there are actually 6 digits on version numbers in PyPI, and some of them have 5. So in this one, you have 15.0, 1.1.0. This means that the last commit setting, that the commits changing the version in the manifest was the one used to publish on PyPI. But sometimes you have a merge request where you bump the version manually, and then there are some other commits, and then you merge, and that's typically the case in migration PRs. And for those, it can be something like this. When the manifest changed, it was 1.0.0, but then there were 2 commits after the manifest change. And then what you get on PyPI is this now. And for version 14 and before, it was publishing something like dev version when there were commits after the version bump in the manifest. But in the end, I came to the conclusion that it was really not useful and creating nodes. And actually, we need to reckon that in OCA, merging is releasing. There is no. no
And
difference.
also there was this check they added on PyPy which prevents from re-uploading a module with the same version.
Definitely. Yeah.
So
that's an important check that PyPI is doing, of course, because if you pin a version, you want to be sure that when you rebuild, you will get the same version. And so we are obliged indeed. And since we have no, in OCA, we have no process to do manual releases. And I've tried on some repos, but it does not work. So I think it's best to reckon that merging is releasing and really counting the commits to generate the version number. It does not mean that you should stop using the bot for merging, of course, because it's nice to express in the manifest that you have to do semantic versioning of the manifest number. That remains important. And that's why doing OCA bot merge, patch, minor or major remains important. But at least on PyPI, you don't have to worry about it. Let's see. Yeah, so OCA dependencies is not used anymore by GitHub Action. That's correct. Yep. And I thought there was a question. Was there a question in the...
But if you use the test requirements to link to a pull request that's not merged yet, you really need to make sure that this does not get merged.
Yes. Yes.
So keep your pull request in draft when you do that, and clean it up before merging. Possibly this could be a check to add on the in the Gitbot.
Yeah, definitely. Not sure where, but
not sure how.
Not sure. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think a question from Jero. Which parts of the OCA infrastructure you think are the worst bottleneck? In which sense? In which sense? In terms of maintenance or performance? Or, in terms of maintenance?
Well, essentially, there are two big categories: things that we maintain but run on other people's hardware, and things that we maintain and run on our hardware. Okay, so the GitHub Actions are running on GitHub servers somewhere, so we don't have to take care about the maintenance of the servers, which is not the case of the Runbots and Weblate and the main Odoo instance, which all are running on some servers that we are renting from a provider. Okay, you should say copier. I don't understand, Grimmy. But okay.
It was just a little joke for her. I was going to say that he should say it's the copier templates that are the hardest to maintain.
Okay. And so, yeah, part of the maintenance is keeping first the server which runs Weblate and the Odoo instance up and running and stable, because this one is critical. It runs our web server, it runs our mailing lists. And a bit less critical, but still time-consuming, is maintaining the 3 servers that run the Runbot currently. And these tend to get pretty loaded with lots of container images running. So I tend to check them a bit less often, but we still need to make some OS level updates and upgrades every so often. and total upgrades of the Debian distribution are always for me a stressful moment. And there's one coming soon because I will have to update to the latest Debian stable version. And that's something I will do probably during the Christmas holidays when things are a bit more quiet and I'm on holiday and don't have the stress from the office coming.
But in general, yeah, there are many, as you see, there are many different pieces. All of them are as autonomous as possible. Some of them are used by others in the community. But yeah, we certainly welcome additional maintainers for any part of this. And then, yeah, especially the tools. Of course, putting too many systems administrators on the same machines is probably not possible, but definitely maintaining the tools is a lot of work. On the bot, there are many open issues that are welcoming help, and so on and so on. Yeah.
And currently, there are some steps which still require manual operations, such as adding a new repository. And this requires a number of manual steps which we would like to automate. Adding a new project, and PSC is even worse at the moment because it needs to act on GitHub. You need to create teams for that. You need to create repositories. Then you need to configure things on the Runbot. You need to add some webhooks in some places. I don't know if Weblate is automatically added. I don't think so. So there's probably one manual operation there too.
No, Weblate is automatic. Yeah.
Okay, but you don't get people added to the team if it's a new PSC.
No, indeed. Well,
and there are some commits to do on the maintainer tools, I think, repository to add the project in some configuration files for some scripts to be able to find it. So that's part of the dirty bits of which happens behind the curtain, and you may not be aware of that if you didn't have to put your hands in it.
Yeah.
The addition of organization level hooks in GitHub was a life changer because it was not the case a few years ago when we migrated to GitHub.
Yeah, definitely.
Apply for the board and you'll see all the processes and the detailed operations needed to add a new PSC if you get elected.
Yeah, that's probably the difficult. Yeah, that's one that's difficult to automate and a lot of work indeed.
Laurent Mignon says, if we switch to GitHub Actions, should we continue to maintain a Travis.yml file in the repository?
Yeah, so yeah, you can go ahead.
Please,
Alexandre.
no, please.
So yeah, basically, the first thing to remember is, as much as possible, don't touch the Travis.yml file manually. Even on older branches, at least on 13, 14, if you need to change something in the Travis because you need APT dependencies or create module groups, the best way to do it is to run the copier template. So you type copier update and you answer the question. It will give the same answer as before for those who you have answered, but you can change the answers to regenerate the template. That's the best way to do it. And if there are things you need to adapt in the Travis configuration that you cannot do by answering questions in the copier template, please open an issue on the OCA template repo so we can discuss how to make it persistent. Because otherwise, when we regenerate the dot files, and it happens a few times a year, you have a high risk to have to do manual maintenance to integrate your changes. And regarding your question about GitHub Actions, what we have chosen to do now is to keep the travis.yaml, but generate it under this .t2d.yaml file. And T2D is for Travis to Docker, which is both a Docker image and the script that's actually parsing the Travis configuration to install everything needed to run the repo on Runbot. So normally it's done automatically for you if you choose. There is a copier question that asks you which CI you want, and if you choose GitHub, you will not get a travis.yaml file, but the t2d.yaml file, which is used by Runbot, at least temporarily.
We are in the process of changing this.
Yeah.
It's being discussed.
Yeah, actually discussed, and I'm prototyping something. Actually, I found a way to do a simple Runbot on Kubernetes.
I like it.
Yeah, it's nice. And actually, it's relatively simple to use Kubernetes to run all the builds with a small controller that does not even need a database to maintain what's going on. And when we deploy everything on Kubernetes, the only thing the controller has to do is basically monitor it and make sure that there are not too many instances running at the same time, and that we are not starting too many instances at the same time, and that there are not too many active concurrently. And I'm toying with a prototype, and so far I'm getting good results. I need to do some load testing, but basically you could declare all the repositories you need in a configuration, and then we'll have a small REST API. My PC does not like Zoom, so it's overloaded. Oh shit. Well, might not be working right now. But the idea is that you can then trigger builds, and they will launch in Kubernetes in a dormant state. So they will be deployed but not started. And on demand, we can then trigger a start in no, my PC does not like it. Well, that will be for another
Demo
time.
effect.
Demo effect. Yeah, it's not. It's certainly not ready, but yeah. And the nice thing with this is that you could, since it's monitoring what's happening in the cluster and does not have its own database, you can simply stop it in Kubernetes, and the controller will detect that it has stopped. And so there are no more synchronization issues, and so on and so on. So it's not a lot of code.
Yeah, I expect Kubernetes will take care of balancing the load among different servers.
Yes, it should do that too.
Which is very different from the current way that the Runbot is working, which is you have different Odoo instances sharing a single database and therefore fighting for a scheduled action lock.
Yeah. And
the first one who gets the lock will get a number of builds. So it evens out, but for load balancing, it's a nightmare. And in the current architecture of the OCA, we have 3 different servers, but they don't have the same size. So I had to cheat and to run more Odoo instances on some of the servers which have more memory and more PPUs than on others. That's why you see Runbot 1.-1, 1-2, 1-3, and only Runbot 3-1 because that one is a smaller server.
And so I have great hopes for this. And basically, an important reason for doing this is that when you look at how Runbot is evolving, basically Odoo is making everything, including coffee, for Odoo SA, and many things that we don't need and we could not use because they have different processes. And we suspect it will become harder and harder to actually use Runbot for our own needs, where actually our needs are relatively simple. And so hopefully something like that will help.
There are some requirements, unwritten requirements in the Odoo Runbot that I've been discussing with them and basically meeting a wall, such as the naming of the pull requests has sense for the Runbot. And if you don't use version number .0 - something, you will get a parse error. So in our Runbot currently, we have basically a fork of the Runbot repository with a number of little quirks. Okay, so we accept, for instance, underscore as a separator between the version number and the pull request name, which they don't, because we don't want to reject pull requests. They can enforce that, being a single company, and saying, okay, that's a rule, and if you don't match this, don't complain. It's much harder for us to have very tight discipline on such seemingly random things.
So and in terms of contributor to this, I'll soon open the repo. But for instance, an interesting contribution, if someone has skills to do a small single-page application to query the REST services to display and create a small UI when you can select the repository and select the branches and so on. It's probably a day of work or two for someone who knows how to do it.
Jairo, to answer your question, so the question by Jairo is, have you considered, for instance, pushing the database and image that the CA test somewhere produce and just running that container later for a number of days as a Runbot? So it could be done. The thing is, that's the current approach of having one Docker image per pull request. That's the one which is used by the current Runbot, and it's very, very inefficient because we end up having hundreds of Docker images for no good reason, and they tend to be quite large. And the approach we have in the OCA CI using GitHub at the moment is to have a single image which just contains one Odoo version inside, which is the common piece between all the pull requests for a given Odoo version. Okay, and then inside that we install using pip the images. So that's a layer in a volume for this part of the data. And so for the image, it doesn't really make sense, but we could have a similar patch with the current Runbot. And the plan with Runbot is to use the same Docker image that's used by the CI. Now, for the database, maybe, I'm not sure it's efficient to rebuild, to export the database after the test somewhere and to restore it on another image, because there will be a significant amount of traffic between the GitHub servers and our server for that, and it could become an issue because GitHub charges for these transfers, or could end up charging. So I still think it's better to rebuild an empty database on the other side. Now, what we could do for Runbot is start with a non-empty database. We could have a database template rebuilt each day with, if only installing base in that template database and starting from that for each database we want could save time in the builds.
Yeah, we might consider using ClickODoInitDB too with the caching mechanism. That might help. That's things to investigate. Yeah.
Let's make it work, and then
First.
we'll make it fast. Yeah, Yannick says, I could imagine having a base plus account on accounting repositories. Yes, but when you do this, you have to be careful with recent versions of Odoo. You generally need to install a localization module before you install account. Otherwise, you end up with the US accounting setup by default.
But when if we use ClickODoInitDB, it could work, especially if we ignore core add-ons.
But even starting with just base will save time.
It will save time. Yeah. But yeah, we'll see how this works, and I have good hopes.
Do we have any other questions?
I'll ask my voice because I can, and I don't feel like typing. Just following on from this, and it's something I just thought of, because in terms of, I guess some contributor issues that we face, is that could we not have a repo-specific database which belongs to the, I guess what we would call the version branch, and use that as the base, and then either upgrade if it's an existing module or install, and then would also be tested any migration scripts that were provided, or just checking that it works for the store. I guess there's probably some things like exclusions that we need to be aware of, but could something like that
we could certainly have a base database which has the module which are dependencies of the add-ons defined in the main branch.
Yeah.
Because we will never remove, or very rarely remove, an add-on in a pull request, only add new ones. Okay, so we could save up some time in the initialization by just having the dependencies of the add-ons of the main branch installed. And this could also possibly speed up the GitHub action tests.
Yeah. On GitHub, of course, if we use the GitHub runners, we start with we are obliged basically to start with a fresh database, unless you would save the dumps somewhere in a cache, but I'm not sure we would win that much by doing that. But of course, on our own machines, we can be more creative. And
there's no cache on the GitHub Actions, not for
not
open
for
source
Postgres
repositories.
No, there is a cache, but for instance, currently the Postgres instance we start is a fresh one for, there are artifacts, things like that. We could use the cache, but then we would need to do a database dump at the end of the run, load it in the cache, things like that. And I don't know also what's the, how long the cache is preserved on GitHub Actions. I don't know. But if we have a shared database for all the tests, then we can imagine doing things.
Yeah.
But that certainly becomes possible, because since the OCA CI image is independent of the specific runner, we can run it basically everywhere. So if we decide one day to run it on our own infrastructure, we could also run the test on our own infrastructure. That has a cost too, because having Runbot is one thing, but on Runbot we just install, we don't run the tests. So it's also cheaper to use GitHub infrastructure to run the test, and then having Runbot to just install and having the thing ready to start for manual tests.
Yep.
We would need more servers if we would run all the tests ourselves.
Current Runbot is really inefficient. Yeah. Won't say more on that.
When can we dump Travis? Good question. I think as soon as, well, it seems to run, the GitHub Action approach is running well. There is no doubt about that. The question is, yes, first replacing Runbot, and then how do we deploy that on other branches? Because for instance, one question we are seeing these days is the development status check. It's active by default on the GitHub version, but if we run it on 14 or 13, we'll get many errors because people simply did not see or did not think about making those development status compatible. That's one type of example. And then if we deploy that, we will see many branches becoming red because of small details that are taken care of by our current Travis maintainer quality tools that will be done slightly differently on GitHub Actions. Installations that are a little bit different, apt dependencies that are managed differently. So if we apply that on other branches, that will generate some churn, some work for maintainer to get the branches back to green. And at some point, there is a cost decision and a community decision if we want to pay the cost of that maintenance.
Can we enable both in parallel for some time to give some time to the maintainers to fix issues on the branches, or maybe deploy it only on the stable branches and not on the pull requests?
Yeah, we can imagine things like that. For instance, I had the idea of putting both together for some time, but then there is the problem that the bot would need to ignore one of the two, because if they both need to be green to run OCA merge, then you get the churn. And making the bot ignore some GitHub actions because pre-commit is already on GitHub, so we must consider pre-commit, but we not the tests. It's difficult changing the bot, so
I think you can enable the tests based on a test on the branch name, so the GitHub Actions.
Yeah.
So we could have the GitHub Actions only running on the 14.0, 13.0, 12.0, etc. branches, and not on the branches managed by the bot.
Also, yeah, that's also a possibility. Yeah, that's correct. Currently, it's here. There is this part. We run pull request to branch 15, starting with 15, and also push to branches starting with 15. So this includes the Cabot merge branches. We could,
but you could have 14.0 without the star.
Yeah, we could try that. Yeah, that's an idea. Yeah.
Because dumping Travis would save us money, actually.
Yeah.
Money that we would be happy to spend on code sprints to fix the GitHub branches builds.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that brings up two questions. One has just been asked by Yannick, which is basically how much we pay for Travis, and I think we'd be fine sharing that. I just don't know the number. But the other thing, and you'll have to forgive me because I probably wouldn't have attended this talk if the moderator had turned up. How much time do you each personally spend maintaining all of this for us? And
you don't want to know.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I do, because it looks like a huge effort, and I think that deserves to be recognised and appreciated. But we'll start with the Travis. How much does the Travis cost? About $400 US a year or something, is it, or is it a month?
I'm checking in the invoices of the OCA.
I think it's like 3,000 per year, 3,000 euro per year or something like that.
So money we could spend better elsewhere.
The truth is that somehow it triggered some modernization effort. It's clear that MQT was showing its age.
It's $250 per month.
No.
49, sorry. $249 per month.
And just the follow-up question there, is that a fixed cost or does it depend on load? I think it's a fixed cost depending on what load you choose.
Yeah, it gives us 5 parallel builds, which is not that much and gets very quickly saturated during code sprints. But I'm not sure we have more parallel builds with the GitHub Actions, to be honest.
Yeah, it's slower than GitHub Actions. Now we need to see how GitHub behaves when we have more builds running on GitHub. But, the impression is still that the machines that GitHub is providing are faster than the one we have on Travis. And also the installation process with OCA CI is faster because we just need to download the image, and then it's a pip install of the dependencies, but that's pretty light compared to installing Odoo. So since Odoo is pre-installed, it should be faster, providing the runners cache the container images. Yeah, there's a question by Tom of why do we need both Runbot and GitHub Actions? We have just one of both. Yeah, the main reason for that is sharing the cost, the hardware cost. Running the tests, we could run the tests on the Runbot, but then we need to provide the hardware to run all those tests. Whereas now running on GitHub Actions, that CPU cost is free.
And also, Runbot does not allow us to split the tests as we are able to do on, for instance, on Travis, to say I want to test these modules separately from these modules. And in some cases, we have modules which are compatible, but for which writing the tests in a way that all the tests run with all the modules installed together is tricky, let's say, because the main case is required values with no defaults. And you could have one module in a repository which adds a required field and possibly doesn't provide a default or is not initialized when the tests of another module are run. And that other module needs to create a record, say a purchase order, and there's no default value, and you get a crash for that. And it makes no sense to supply a value in the test of that other module because it has no dependency on the first one. But since when testing, you install all the modules all together, well, by default, that's what the Runbot does. You get that issue. So basically, they serve two different purposes. The CI serves testing that the modules work as advertised. Okay, that the tests are green, that you are not breaking things by adding a new feature. And the Runbot is used mainly for functional people to interactively test or manually test a pull request or a module on a given branch.
Sometimes I wonder if we should not run all the tests in post-install mode, but we could spend the afternoon discussing that, so I'm not open.
Yep, that's often a solution.
Yeah. And enforce
but it only works if a required field has a default value.
Yeah, yeah. Which might be a good requirement to make for any module.
If you have a reasonable default.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. We can argue all afternoon about that.
Yeah, definitely.
And you asked Grimmy how much time we spend on this. I don't have a definitive answer about that. What I know is that Camp to Camp sponsored 60 hours of my time in 2021 working on the Runbot. And then there's time which is not part of my timesheets at Camp to Camp, and I have no idea about that.
Yeah, I'm not filling timesheet. That's a privilege I have, but I can tell you it's a lot of hours. And yes, some of it is fun, I must admit, and writing the Runbot replacement is interesting in itself. So, but yeah, other thing is real work, real maintenance work, and there is quite a lot of it. Yes, definitely. If you look at the checklist, for instance, I created to create the 15.0 branches, quite a lot of moving parts to set up, and it takes hours quickly accumulate when you have to set up all those things. So yeah, so it's still fun to do. No worries about that, but we definitely welcome more maintainers. So if you're interested in all these things, and the good thing is that at this stage it's becoming very modular, with many little tools being combined together for OCA. And so many tools you can use also for your own organization. For instance, at Axon, our CI does not look at all like the OCA CI, but it reuses many components that we have in OCA CI. So that's useful work, definitely for the community, even those not running the same processes as OCA.
Rootshare is asking, why don't we have 3 databases built from one pull request, base all repo modules, install and test? I'm not sure what the benefit would be, except spending more disk.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I can kind of see what that's getting at in terms of sometimes you do have that unrelated module failure, but at the end of the day, it doesn't happen very often.
And if it happens, yeah, but at least it should install, hopefully. At least all modules for push should at least install together, possibly not test, but and if really there is a problem, you can still uninstall some modules on Runbot to do what you want. So.
One thing we're lacking is rebuilds of reverse dependencies.
Rebuild of reverse dependencies.
We had the case on some of our projects where updating, I don't know, say sale workflow, one module to a newer version breaks in a totally different place, something which depends on that module from sale workflow. And currently, this is something our CI doesn't flag at all.
Yeah.
But this is something we could probably, well, in theory, we could take care of that with a scheduled build.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, given the size and number of repositories, if we can afford it.
Yeah, I have no idea.
And who would take care of the red branches? That's another different topic.
To be honest, I'm still looking where the GitHub notifications for the OCA organization are going.
Probably on the email address on Gmail.
Yeah.
And well, we can check that together. I have the access to the Gmail account.
Because
I'm
for
the
instance,
one with the phone number.
Yeah, when Odoo switched to declaring they require Python 3.7 on the 15 branches, the OCA CI image build starting to fail, but I did not notice. So
okay,
we need to run that down. Yeah.
Okay, I think.
All right.
We're getting
Time's
to
up.
the end, and that Simone is waiting.
He is. He even put his hand up. It was quite desperate.
Hello.
Hello. So yeah,
Hello,
Alex
Simone.
and Stéphane, that was brilliant. You know, it was just incredible to see exactly how much infrastructure there is and all the work that goes into maintaining it all and what the future holds. And certainly Runbot looks very interesting. So thank you for your time.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Especially time spent out of the meeting.
Yeah.
I mean, out of the OCA days. Yeah.